Welcome to Wildlife and Water Friendly Gardens series. We are now into our 5th week, I believe. Yep, 5th week, February 20th. And this week, we're going to be talking about plant tolerances to weather extremes. Before we begin, as always, I would like to thank our sponsor, Water Environment Services, for the support of our programs and allowing us to offer these for free. We also have many great sponsors, including Oak Lodge Water Services, Greater Oregon City Watersheds Council, North Clackamas Watersheds Council, Tryon Creek Watersheds Council, Clackamas River Basin Council, and Clackamas River Water Providers. So thank you very much to all of those organizations for their support. Also, if you do feel so inclined, we welcome any donations that you can give us here at the Environmental Learning Center. You know, we do rely on those to be able to put on our programs. And if you've enjoyed this, even a small donation would really help. So thanks so much. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Alexis, who is going to introduce our speakers for today's topic on plant tolerances to weather extremes. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks everybody for doing an awesome job so far with one of our first housekeeping items, which is to mostly stay muted. It's just nice to be able to proceed without any little unexpected noises making their way through our speakers. So thanks for staying on mute. If you guys have any questions, please send them through on chat. I'm under the weather and I'm going to switch off my video, but I will be paying attention to those questions as they come through and then conveying them back to Amy and or Christine at the end of the presentation today. The only other thing I have before I introduce our speakers is I'm glad for some of the conversation that came through in chat already, since we do have some folks tuning in from beyond Clackamas County. But some of the resources that, that Christine and Amy are going to be referring to today might be Clackamas County specific. And so this is through Clackamas Community College. So really kind of the Tri-County, Portland metro area is where this information is most likely to be applicable. And so for some of you guys, things will be more local resources that you would want to find a mirror of in your community. All right, with no further ado, we have Christine Hollenbeck. For more than 2 decades, Christine has worked in the drinking water industry and has spent the last 18 years as a water conservation and public outreach and education program coordinator for the Clackamas River Water Providers, which is a coalition of cities and public water providers who use the Clackamas River as their drinking water source. Christine's background includes all things public drinking water, and before entering the drinking water industry, she worked in the landscape industry, wholesale nurseries, residential and industrial landscape maintenance, as well as tree care. We're also joined by Amy Whitworth, who is the lead designer and owner of Planet Earth Design in Southeast Portland. For over 25 years, Amy has been helping her clients craft earth-friendly gardens and deepen their connection with the natural world. Her background combines horticulture and fine arts. Amy has received numerous awards for her educational and habitat garden displays. As an educator, Amy presents on various sustainable design topics to homeowners, gardeners, and professionals alike. Since 2005, she's been a vocal advocate for the rights of Oregon's professional landscape designers to practice their trade. No further ado, then, Christine, we'll have you speak first, and then we'll turn it right over to Amy from there.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here this afternoon. I'm always so pleased to see that the Wildlife and Garden Friendly series is so popular to everyone. Like Amy said, my name is Christine Hollenbeck, and I work for the Clackamas River Water Providers. And you know, Amy's presentation on plant tolerances to weather extremes is something that's kind of near and dear to our heart. Our group, the Clackamas River Water Providers, basically has 2 employees that work for all of the cities and public water providers that use the Clackamas River as a drinking water source. The customer base, all of them combined, is almost 400,000 people here in the Clackamas area, not the whole county, but most of the upper north portion and part of Washington County. You know, what we do is work on conserving and protecting the Clackamas River, not only as a drinking water source, but also as a natural habitat. And so our source water protection program and our water conservation program and our public education and outreach all focuses on helping our customers know how to best, be efficient with their drinking water use. What to do with it in the summer. And then also the best way to protect it outside, like in terms of stormwater management. So, any of you that have been around the Portland area for a while know that over the last about 10 years, our summers have gotten longer, hotter, and drier. And during that time, the river levels can really dip down quite a bit. We launched, I think this will be our 8th year, with the Clackamas River Water Providers launched a summer watering campaign solely focused to the end of summer to help people conserve more water and start shutting off all of their outdoor watering, so that there's enough water in the river for the fall fish migration. So anyway, having said that, I'm really excited to hear what Amy's going to talk about today. And thank you, Amy, and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Christine. If I could only move this forward. Oh. Thanks, everybody. Sorry for the technical glitches. That was me all over the place. So we're going to talk today about the plant tolerances to weather extremes. And, that starts with the climate. So we have had the hottest, driest temperatures on the planet. And even January this year is the hottest ever on record. So we're continuing a pattern of climate change. I think it's pretty undeniable at this point. So we need to look towards other areas of the world that have similar climates to ours. We are the Portland area, known for our modified Mediterranean climate, which is basically wet in the winter and hot and dry in the summertime. So sometimes it's helpful to look at plants that grow in some of these other regions that have similar types of climatic patterns to ours, which is pretty unique because we are being dry in the summer during the time of plant growth is a pretty difficult condition for many plants. But it's not only getting hotter and drier, it's also getting wetter and icier with bigger, more extreme weather events, which will often affect the poorer neighborhoods with, particularly in urban areas, with the heat island effect of, reflected heat off of pavements and roadways, and also leading to drier and more stressed out trees, which also leads to wildfire, and also, bigger rain events in the winter time with more erosion and flooding and just the hazards surrounded with that. So one of the things that we can do is to look towards our native plants for plants that are very tolerant of the conditions that we live in. So they are our native plants most suited to our climate. They're suited to our heavy clay soils, which most of us have. We can look towards our wetland plants that can tolerate flooding events very successfully. Looking towards our prairie and slope plants that can tolerate drier conditions. And these plants also their roots help to break up heavy soil and improve the drainage. So we're looking towards these habitat types because we want to plant these plants in the communities that they like to live in. Plants that live in the same types of conditions, you'll group them together and plant them in the same types of places. Plants have many survival strategies that they have developed over the years to tolerate weather extremes, and weather extremes basically are weather events that happen out of the sync of nature. So, for example, this rhododendron, which Christine mentioned earlier, in a cold winter, these rhododendrons will just kind of curl their leaves up in the wintertime to reduce their leaf surface area. And that is also to keep them warmer, but also to thaw out more slowly, so their cells don't explode when the sun hits their leaves and warms up too quickly. Other strategies are deep tap roots for resisting wind and to gather extra moisture down deeper into the earth and to draw up minerals from deeper areas in the earth. Leathery leaves, waxy leaves, hairy leaves are all strategies to combat a lot of sun and heat. Some plants have adapted with a specific ability to store water in their trunks, in their leaves, or in their roots. They use the strategy of wilting to preserve their moisture and possibly go into an early dormancy if things get really hot and dry. Sometimes our native plants, this has been happening particularly to our native plants that are having to use early dormancy as a strategy to persevere through heat dome or very, very hot summertime. Other survival strategies for something like mosses and lichens in the Pacific Northwest will go dormant in the summertime when it's dry, and then maybe turn white or brown in the summer, and then green up in the wintertime with all the rain and expand their surface area. Plants may have small leaves when they are in extreme sun conditions to reduce their surface area. They might have larger leaves in the shade to absorb more sun and try to pick up as much light as possible. They may have flexible stems or bark or trunks for wind resistance, or even insulated bark, like thick trunk, like a Doug fir, for fire suppression, and various reproductive strategies, like a stressed out tree will make a lot of seed, same with any other type of a plant, so that they can be sure that they will reproduce themselves. Sometimes plants low to the ground will make pups that will be able to clone themselves. If the mother plant dies, they have a smaller version of themselves. So we need to look towards good garden practices for better garden resiliency for our own homes. And that starts with building healthy soil. And last week, if you joined us, where we learned about all the importance about soil, if there's no soil structure, there's no infiltration of water. So compacted soil is the enemy. And these are the principles of keeping healthy soils, which is living roots in the ground, keeping plants growing, reducing compaction wherever possible. And sometimes that is not walking on the soil. Sometimes it's not tilling the soil. Sometimes it's not allowing winter rains to hit bare soil. So you kind of covering the ground. Leaving the leaves in the fall is a great way to help improve your soil, improve the permeability, but also protecting the surface of the soil and adding nutrients to the soil. And of course, no chemicals. Oops. Arborist chips is another great way. Chip drop is a an app that you can use, getchipdrop.com, a free way to get arborist chips. So these are the prunings and cuttings of arborists that are all chipped up in their trucks that can be dumped on or near your property. They are pretty much branches and sticks and chippings of different sizes. So it's pretty airy, and it tends to break down. It breaks down slowly, so it adds nutrients to the soil over time. And as it does that, it starts to activate the soil microbes. It's a great, particularly for trees and shrubs, native trees as well as non-native trees and shrubs. Sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult for a perennial to come up through those materials, but they do a pretty good job of it. It's also really nice because it disguises fallen plant debris when that inevitably happens in our gardens and we have a nice dark mulch surface. It looks like a stain on the carpet. So when you have arborist chips, it also just makes it difficult to notice all that little bits of debris. I like to think that weathered gray is the new black when it comes to mulch on the surface of the ground. Also, you know, these arborist chips are going to help to keep the moisture in the ground for a longer period of time. So when the sun really starts beating on the ground, it's going to take longer for our clay soils, which are very good at maintaining moisture. But it's the surface of the clay soil that dries out so quickly. So when you have a nice thick mulch like the arborist chips, it's going to take a longer time for that soil to start drying out. And we can rely on our nice moist ground for a longer period of time. You want to layer on these arborist chips quite deeply, at least 4 to 6 inches or more. Like a foot of chips is really a good recommended amount so that it lasts more than a season, or up to a year, because it really does shrink down, particularly when it's wet over the winter time. So the fall is the best time to lay down the arborist chips, but really any time that you can cover the soil is a good time. A lot of people use this system for smothering lawns, also known as sheet composting. And that technique has been traditionally with newspaper or cardboard at the bottom and then chips on top. But studies have shown that the cardboard really isn't needed if you have a thick enough layer of those wood chips. But there's other types of mulches that might be used in the garden to help plant resiliency, and a lot of it depends on the type of plants that you're planting and what their needs are. So I think, yeah. First is woody mulches, which can be the arborist chips, but it can also be bark dust or things like that, which help to keep the soils cool in the summer and warmer in the winter. And as I mentioned, they'll help to retain moisture and reduce weeds. They do improve the soil health as they continue to break down by activating the microbes and providing nutrients to the soil, and help to reduce compaction at the same time. On the other hand, gravel mulches are more for alpine plants and plants that grow in rocky conditions that need a lot of our Mediterranean plants and herbs, things like rosemary, really appreciate the improved drainage from rocky soils and gravel mulches. So sometimes when plants die over the winter, things like the rosemary in particular might have benefited from a gravel mulch that keeps the water away from the crowns of the plants and keeps moisture from splashing up onto the plant where they can get fungal diseases. So it can improve the drainage, even just at the crown of the plant or deeper into the soil. It can also reflect heat and help to keep the plant warmer. It's a fireproof material, so as we're concerned with fire danger, we're looking towards some gravel mulches sometimes closer to the house. And gravel and rock can create moisture from condensation and the change of temperature from daytime to evening to morning. So we can actually get a little bit of water from our gravel. Another way to really consider preserving moisture in the soil is by using green mulch, which is planting densely and covering the ground with plant material. And this is basically how nature does it. Lots of plants growing close together, which helps to reduce the temperature and increases the local moisture, because the plants themselves are taking up moisture from the soil, yes, but they're also expelling moisture through evaporation in their leaves and cooling down the local area around the plants. And of course, all of that, particularly with by using native plants, will build habitat. And the way that the plant's roots activate microbes with the soil is that special relationship that plant roots have with their microbiology in the soil, and the way that they communicate and trade resources through mycorrhizal fungi. Also, the more plants you have, the less weeds you're going to have. So the more you select the plants for your garden, the less Mother Nature is going to show up in terms of weeds with her ideas. And this is this idea of matrix planting, which is kind of a relatively new gardening phenomena, which is a technique of layered plantings that start with an understory of shade-tolerant ground covers. So the ground is always, this is planting plants quite closely together, closer than a foot from one another, shady ground covers that will then get covered with larger plants that, you know, each successive month, new plants arise from the ground and tower over the other ground covers. So sometimes that is some grasses that are underneath, other kinds of spreading ground covers with larger plants that come up through them. All of this to say that we want to cover the soil and protect it, because the rain is a big influence in compaction. We can notice our soils might be smooth and hard once things start to dry out in the spring, and then that's known as hard pan, and is really bad for the soil. But even if we just leave the leaves, we're protecting the soil from that rain and wind, but also the heat and the sun in the summertime. Sometimes the leaves are pretty much decayed and gone by then, which is when we want to add different kinds of woodier mulches that'll break down more slowly. And just one other thing is that, you know, sometimes you'll see this kind of dry, cracked ground in your own garden in the summertime. And if you start to see that, once things really start to dry out, it's really a perfect time to add compost to your soil, because the ground is opened up and with these big cracks, and it allows you to get some nice organic material a little bit deeper into the soil. And then when the rains come, it'll kind of help to mix it into that clay soil. So the flip side to the drought and the heat, of course, is our wet winter soils and the excessive rain that we can get with bigger storm events here in the Pacific Northwest. So things that you can do is to, you know, of course, redirect water to an appropriate spot if you have an appropriate spot. Sometimes the problem is that you can't get to where you need to go in the wintertime. So it might make sense to create some dry gravel paths for circulation to the places that you need to go to, and let the flooding happen. It's not a problem if you don't need to walk in it all the time. So lawn is a big problem when it comes to excessive moisture. And one solution would be to create a wetland bed in a poorly draining spot. So if you can't bring that water to another place, maybe you want to consider planting plants that like those types of conditions. We have a lot of wetland natives. This is a property that is a very, very wet location with a lot of water coming from uphill properties, and it's wet all summer even, and mostly wet from irrigation from upland properties. So this lawn has lawn drains throughout it that go to a sump pump that then pumps the water to the street, which is not ideal, but it's the only place that this water could go to. It's also got drains around the edges of the lawn. But most importantly, we reduced the lawn significantly, even though it is a pretty big lawn here. We reduced it significantly and planted many plants that are very happy in the wet conditions. And another idea brought to us from Joy Creek Nursery is this idea of top dressing your lawn with 1/4 crushed gravel. Sometimes when your lawn is so wet and soggy, you just sink right into it up into your ankles. And when you add the 1/4 crushed gravel, and that is the larger pieces, just 1/4 inch, but no smaller, that will make a firm surface as you when you walk on the ground, that soil, and over time the gravel just kind of squishes into the clay soil and firms up the surface of it. But it also provides a drier place for the crowns of those grass plants to come up through the gravel. Within a couple of months, it's going to cover up all that gravel. So they top dress with up to 3 inches of gravel, usually not all at one time. I kind of like to use about 1/2 inch at a time, but you can use up to 1 inch. And then filling low spots to eliminate puddles is an obvious way to deal with some wet spots in your lawn. Also, amending your soils and grading lawn areas properly. And thinking about alternatives to lawn, like ecology lawns that are a mix of grass and clover and some small flowering plants, perennials that are mostly evergreen, but they create a diversity of root depths in the soil. And plants like clover that really enhance the growth of all plants around them by providing, because they create, they fix nitrogen from the air and transport it to their roots in little nodules that then can be released when plant roots die to the surrounding soil. So they're fertilizing as well as creating various root depths. Clovers are pretty deep-rooted plants. These are very drought-tolerant lawn alternatives that will stay green even when the summer heat comes. If you notice your own lawn that might have some clover in it, it's the clover that stays green, and other weeds that stay green in your lawn when the grass itself will die. So this is a nice way to conserve water in the summer and keeping a lawn that's greener than you might have today. Improving drainage. This is at planting time is a great opportunity to add some amendments to the soil, because you are already breaking into that soil and disrupting the microorganism community, but you can reactivate them by adding 1/2 and 1/2 compost and pumice, or the 1/4 crushed gravel is a really nice kind of clay buster mix to add to soils, to mix in when you plant the plants. And we use it sometimes as a top dressing as well. And another similar type of an approach would be using some other materials. One that's known as turfus, which is a product that is like a high-fired clay and absorbs a lot of water. Axis is a calcified diatomaceous earth product that allows for, again, water to penetrate, and also for microorganisms to colonize, as well as biochar, which is a little different than charcoal, but it is basically bioactivated charcoal that helps improve soil health. Managing our stormwater on site is really important for plant resiliency and to store water for later in the season. So we should do all that we can to contour our sloping areas so that we're controlling water movement and keeping water on site whenever we can, with very subtle berms and mounds. Rain gardens are great, and they're a little bit more exaggerated versions and larger areas to contain water, but you can also just kind of spread them throughout your property if you have a little bit of a slope and a way to direct water, with subtle berms and mounds. And you can accent that, of course, with boulders or logs. But the idea is to think of your property as its own watershed and try to keep all that stormwater on site. Or you can make a dry creek bed. This property had a little bit of a water concern for the homeowner, so we made sure to grade all of the ground away from the house and away from the property line to a low swale in the middle of the property. That also became a feature and something to plant around. And I can't emphasize enough the idea of planting trees to control stormwater, because trees can soak up a tremendous amount of stormwater through their roots. The older they get, the more important they are. They cool local areas, and they, draw up and release nutrients, as well as storing carbon in their all their plant parts. And they do a lot to control erosion as well. A lot of our native trees have been suffering from the effects of the heat domes and just excessive drought over a period of years. And so if you are the steward of some of our native trees, whether they be cedars or firs or hemlocks, deeply watering these conifers once a month in the summer will really go a long way to protect their health, because they're having trouble doing it on their own. The winter just doesn't seem to be enough.
Hey, Amy, I'm coming off mute just to give you a brief time check.
Okay.
About 5-ish minutes left would be great.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So assisted migration is this idea of transplanting or taking plants from that are native to other areas of drier, like Southern California, and moving them northward. Plants can't do this very quickly by themselves, so sometimes they rely on our assistance to do that. And I think a lot of us have been already doing planting manzanitas and California wild lilacs that are not native here, or California evergreen native oaks. But also, I think, we humans have gotten it wrong before. We have lots of good ideas about things, but we don't always get it right. There might be other effects that we don't really understand in terms of supporting our native insects and their relationship with the bloom times of native plants and things like that. So keep that in mind. When we have freezing temperatures and ice storms, it's important to protect plants and think about how they might be prepared to weather those extremes, and might need some protection, particularly tall, narrow plants that might tend to splay out in big weather events. So you might want to tie up narrow plants or wrap them You can protect plants by adding some mulch if they're marginally hardy, adding some mulch to their roots, making sure that the plants are going into the freeze well watered. This is really important because the moisture creates a little bit of a warmth around those plants. So sometimes they'll freeze and they're so dry that they just, their cell walls explode and they just don't have any reverse pressure to push against the ice. But ice itself and snow cover is warmer than some single digit freezing temperatures. So sometimes it makes sense to spray your foliage right before the freeze so that you are actually protecting them with a coating of ice before the single digits come, and then you're keeping the plant at 32 degrees. Also, assessing damage after the freeze, the best thing is to just be patient, because you can't always tell right away. It might look like a plant is dead, but then, as we've learned over the past few years, sometimes if you wait long enough, it'll actually come back to life again. So be patient. You can do the scratch test, which is shown here for woody plants. If it's green below the surface, then the plant is still alive. If it's brown, it's dead. And wait to cut your plants back hard. Wait until the spring comes, until you're starting to see new buds, would be the best approach. And also, oftentimes, we just make an assumption about something being dead, but it really takes a while it might not be until the summer that you start to see the things come back, especially for some of the grasses and warm season plants. So if you can wait, a lot of times by the time you finally dig it up to get a new plant, you'll see active roots in that plant. So wait. For dry summer gardens, considering natives from drier climates, improving soils with mulch and with gravel, and berming for extra drainage, because a lot of those drier Mediterranean plants don't like our wet weather. Also, avoid summer planting if you can, but sometimes you just need to plant in the summer because that's where the plants are. It's really important to use summer planting techniques and bucket soak your plants, taking them in a bucket, plunging them underwater until you see no more air bubbles, and then planting. So your plant is completely saturated with water. Water your holes so that they usually fill them 2 to 3 times with water before you plant. Then plant your plant, and then water well and water daily thereafter. So you have a little reservoir of water underneath the plant to help them make it through that hot summer time. But November through April is the best time. We're still in perfect planting season. It helps to know something about your soil texture and how nutrient rich your soils are. Mostly our clays are pretty nutrient rich and usually lower in nitrogen because of all the rains that we have. But given that we're talking about the wet seasons, you should never plant into saturated soils. Just wait until the soil dries out a little bit, like a wrung out sponge. Better to add amendments on the surface and then incorporate with the planting of your plant in the backfill, as opposed to tilling the soil. Although if your soil is really bad and you have no plants in the area, tilling once is not a bad way to incorporate and activate your soils. Make sure that you are loosening tight or pot bound encircling roots from a potted plant before you plant them, and then be sure that you get good root to soil contact, and don't forget to water and mulch after planting. And irrigation wise, there is the Regional Water Providers Consortium weekly water number, which generally relates to lawn, but there's a calculation that you can use for shrubs and trees as well. And this is watering to the weather, so you will get a email each week as to how much water your plants might need this week. But hand watering, drip irrigation, and soaker hoses and the multi-trajectory rotor heads are some of the better, more water efficient ways to water your gardens. And also there are or have been incentives to get smart controllers that are tied to local weather stations that will make sure that your water doesn't come on if we're about to get some rain or during rain. And then the rest are just some slides of some fire-resistant plants. I mean, plants for different purposes. This is fire-resistant plants. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but basic fire resistance in plants is plants that hold moisture in their leaves, deciduous plants that tend to be moister than evergreens, plants that have an open plant structure as opposed to dense plants that self-cleaning and don't hold a lot of debris in their branches. Drought-tolerant shrubs. These are some examples of those. Plants that are basically have smaller leaves. They tend to be grayer, or silvery leaf plants are often drought tolerant. And they can persist for a long time without water. And some flowers, same thing, that plants that can tolerate long periods of drought. Dianthus are nice because they're evergreen. Epilobium, California fuchsia from California, that likes those types of conditions. And drought tolerant grasses. Some of them are drought tolerant as well as moisture tolerant. You'll see the miscanthus or maiden grass in the wet tolerant slide as well. But Bouteloua is a new grass for our area that is really fun and interesting to look at, as in is Schizachyrium, little blue stem. Wet tolerant trees that can live in rain gardens and can tolerate flooding, for seasonal flooding for a period of time. Examples of those trees, both native and non-native. Wet tolerant grasses, rushes and sedges particularly, but tufted hairgrass is a good one. Phormium tenax or New Zealand flax is marginally hardy, but also can tolerate both wet and dry conditions. Some of these, the Acorus is really great for the shade in a wet spot. They don't like hot sun. And some wet tolerant flowers like our native butterfly weed, Asclepias incarnata, is a great plant for a wet area, our native camas, but a lot of these others are really suited for seasonally wet areas. And that is the presentation. So hopefully, if you have any questions, that you put those in the chat.
Yeah, we've had a few come through. I'm ready to start sharing them back to you.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. Let's see. A couple of questions related to chip drop. Someone was inquiring whether there are standards for arborists with chip drop to avoid incorporating invasives that reproduce from shoot or root cuttings or seeds. Particular species of concern that were mentioned were tree of heaven and bindweed.
There are not. Generally, the whole idea with chip drop and putting, I know I've heard a lot of people being concerned about weeds and seeds in chip drop. Basically, these are shredded plant material, so they're not likely to seed and sprout. And the other thing is that even with the tree seeds, like the tree of heaven, they do not, because it is a woody material onto the surface of the ground, if you put a thick enough layer of the chip drop down, it won't, first of all, it will, it tends to rob nitrogen right from the surface of the soil, so the seeds won't sprout. And then the second most important thing is that you have a deep enough layer of the chip drop down so that it suppresses, they're not really getting the light and air that they need to grow if they were to sprout. So, and the same with plant pathogens. They don't just translocate from the chips into the soil. So there's a handout that was written by Linda Chalker Scott, who has lots of information about and the wonders of arborist chips, and talks about a lot of these things. That's a new OSU handout that is a resource that Alexis will send out afterwards.
Yeah, we'll be sending out the slides as well as those links. And I know from personal experience that you can request that some species be excluded, and so Tree of Heaven is something you can note in that box, but it might delay the delivery of your chip drop.
Right.
Okay, another chip drop question is, would you recommend using chip drop for the base of layering in raised beds?
Not so much. It is not really a material for underground. It is a material for the surface of the ground. So there's been a lot of discussion and interest in hugelkultur, which is hugelkultur, the idea being that you're putting rotting wood in the bottom of the hole. So yes, you can put rotting wood down there, but not fresh chips, because that will rob the nitrogen. Very important, especially for vegetables.
Thank you. Someone is moving into a new home and the garden is a blank slate, and they asked if they should space plants closely or allow them space for the expected size of the mature plants.
When you have a blank slate, it's important to think about the spacing of your plants. You don't want to jam things together too closely when you're starting. In other words, you want to start with your biggest plants and work down towards your smallest plants. So give room for your trees to grow. I mean, trees don't need their absolute full canopy without getting involved in another plant, but give them some room. Don't plant them, 4 feet from the next tree, unless you're trying to create a very dense forest, which is
Right.
another approach. But yeah,
Thank you.
larger to smaller.
Thank you.
Mhm.
There was a question about whether you should dig in compost. And someone had replied in the chat that to be careful about adding amendments to holes from trees and shrubs. But yeah, overall, would you say that you should dig in compost?
Yeah, I mean, my preferred technique is to layer compost on the surface of the ground and then dig it in with the plants when you plant. I think the concern and the reply is to think of soil as being bad and compost as being good. That's a problem. So you don't want to dig a big, beautiful hole and fill it with compost only and then plant your tree. Then you're just creating a big place for water to hold. So you want to make sure that you have no more than 1/3 compost to 2/3 native soil, if not more native soil, to the hole, which is why I recommend 2 inches of compost or soil amendment on the surface, and then digging your hole will get you about where you need to be.
Would you adjust that ratio for planting in spaces where the topsoil has been removed and it's like just pure clay, so there isn't really an ability to mix the soil?
If things have been that disturbed and you are working with subsoil, that's when I would really layer on arborist chips and
Great.
maybe let it sit for a little while.
Got it. Thank you. Let's see. It looks like the last question we might have is how long should the monthly summer deep watering for conifers be? This person said that they use a soaker hose at the base of their 2 conifers and water for about 3 hours.
I would say maybe water overnight if it's really dripping in, to give a good soaking. It just depends on how much water is being released and how much of the soaker hose is there. So if it's like soaker hose looped around, you might not need that much time because you're actually getting a lot of soaking. But you also don't want to soak just right around the tree, close to the trunk. You want to spread it out as far as you can. So if you took like a full soaker hose and, kind of spiraled it around, starting maybe 2 feet out from the trunk and going out further as far as you can, would be a good approach to soaking that plant.
Thank you so much. I'm keeping an eye in chat for any other questions coming through. I just popped the evaluation link in there. That is a really great way for us to receive feedback from attendees. And yeah, as you mentioned, Amy, we'll be sending out a couple of links to some resources. Maybe while we just give folks a last minute chance to either click on that evaluation link or to send questions in. Do you want to briefly chat about those 3 resources? It's the water efficient plants for the Willamette Valley, the Clackamas River Water Providers rebate page, and Christine, you're welcome to talk about that one for us. And then there's the Regional Water Providers Consortium member rebates web link.
Yeah, for sure. So years ago, it's been literally probably a little more than 2 decades, there was a group of water conservation specialists and designers and in partnership with Clackamas Community College and some others, and we created a plant guide for water efficient plants for the Willamette Valley area specifically. It does have some native plants, but not all. There are some adaptive plants in this plant guide, and it has some nice pictures, and it really tells you about what that plant needs to make sure that you're putting the right plant in the right place. The link is a link to our Clackamas River Water Providers website, and we've got that guide up there in a digital form so you can look at it. But if you are interested, I'm happy to mail a copy of it to you. You can just send me your email. All that information's on our website. Also, the Clackamas River Water Providers for our member customers. So you have to go to our website and see, who our members are. We do have a really nice rebate program. We have some indoor water rebates, but also some outdoor water rebates, one of which is for, if you wanted to get a new smart controller for your irrigation system. We also have a rebate that provides financing for people to be able to change out their old irrigation spray heads with the newer multi-stream type of spray head, which are much more water efficient. And we also have a link to the weekly watering number on our website, but the Regional Water Providers Consortium, they are the provider of the weekly watering number. Please keep in mind that number is specific to the Portland Metro kind of Tri-County area, and that is primarily because, like the Clackamas River Water Providers, the Regional Water Providers Consortium is also made up of local public water providers in that Tri-County area and financially supported by them. So the weekly watering number, again, it's just specific to the Tri-County area. But if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email so I could help sort out any confusion that there might be.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Well, I haven't seen any other questions come through, so I think we're probably ready to wrap. Michelle, do you want to let us know what we're going to be learning about next week?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Amy and Christine. Very interesting information, very practical and useful to all of us in this area. So next week, February 27th, we're again continuing with the theme, and we will be addressing the topic of balancing fire resistance, wildlife habitat and water conservation goals. So a similar theme to this week, but we will have Laura Price, who's with Design with Nature, will be talking on that topic. And again, I think this is wonderful information for all of us who can't wait to get back out there and see the state of our plants and get ready for the spring. So I really appreciate all these little tips to help us be better gardeners and to conserve the water that we have here. We will be sending out the link to the recording after this talk, and any of the resources such as those that have gone up. So if you missed them in the chat, we will be sending those to you. All right. Anything else you wanted to say, Alexis? Hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. No, the only other thing is just that the evaluation link is right there in the chat. And thank you so much, Christine and Amy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.